The year is 1066, 3 kings, 2 battles, 1 throne. This is the story of the man whose death ended an entire era. This is the story of Harald Hardrada, the last great Viking king. Our story begins not at the end, but with a boy of 15. The year is 1030, at the bloody Battle of Stiklestad. Young Harald Sigurdsson fights alongside his half-brother, King Olaf of Norway. But the battle is lost, Olaf is killed, and Harald is left for dead, gravely wounded. This defeat wasn't an end, it was a brutal beginning. A teenage refugee, forced to flee his homeland, Harald began a journey that would forge him into a legend. He traveled east, through the vast lands of the Kiev and Rus, finally arriving at the richest city in the world, Constantinople, the heart of the Byzantine Empire. With nothing but his sword and his ambition, Harald enlisted in the emperor's most elite unit, the Varangian Guard. These were the best of the best, Viking mercenaries serving as the personal bodyguards of the Byzantine Emperor. But Harald wasn't just another soldier, he was a force of nature. In the campaigns that followed, he carved a fearsome reputation. In Sicily, fighting against Arab emirs, his ferocity and tactical genius earned him the nickname, the Thunderbolt of the North. He fought in Bulgaria, quelling rebellions, and even journeyed to the Holy Land, battling in the streets of Jerusalem. He was a master of war, and with every victory, his fame grew, and so did his wealth. He plundered cities and collected tribute, sending a river of gold and silver back to the Kiev and Rus for safekeeping. They said he had gathered more wealth than any Norseman had ever seen. For a decade, he served the empire, rising to become the commander of the entire Varangian Guard. But Harald was always playing a longer game. His eyes were set on the prize he had lost as a boy, the crown of Norway. The Byzantine Emperor, however, wasn't keen on letting his best general and his vast treasure leave. In 1042, Harald had to make a cunning and daring escape. Legend says he and his men had to slip out of the city under the cover of darkness, possibly with a princess and a significant amount of imperial treasure he claimed was his own. He sailed back to the Kiev and Rus, married the Princess Yaroslava, and with his immense fortune, prepared for his return. When Harald landed back in Norway, he was no longer a wounded boy, but a hardened warrior prince with an army and a treasury to rival a king's. He forged an alliance with the King of Denmark, forcing his nephew, the current King of Norway, to a compromise. They would rule together. It was a partnership that lasted only a year before his nephew died under mysterious circumstances, leaving Harald Sigurdsson as the sole ruler of Norway. He was now King Harald Hardrada, meaning the hard ruler, and a hard ruler he was. For the next 20 years, he ruled with an iron fist. He centralized power, reformed the economy by creating a national currency, and expanded Norway's influence through ruthless warfare and shrewd diplomacy. He waged a long, brutal war against Denmark, constantly raiding its coasts, solidifying his reputation as a king you did not cross. He transformed Norway from a fractured kingdom into a unified and formidable European power. But one prize still eluded him, an obsession that would define his final days, the throne of England. Through a complex web of old treaties and dynastic claims, Harald believed he had a legitimate right to the English crown. When King Edward the Confessor died in early 1066 without an heir, England was thrown into chaos. An English earl, Harold Godwinson, was crowned king, but Harald Hardrada saw his chance. He assembled the largest Viking invasion force seen in over a century. A fleet of 300 longships, carrying over 10,000 elite warriors, sailed from Norway. This wasn't just a raid, it was a grand invasion to conquer a kingdom. They landed in northern England, joined by Harold Godwinson's exiled brother, Tostig. Their first encounter was a stunning success. At the Battle of Fulford, they crushed the northern English army. The city of York surrendered, and it seemed Harald Hardrada's ambition was within his grasp. He was on the verge of becoming king of Norway and England. Confident in his victory, he moved his army a few miles to a place called Stamford Bridge to await the hostages and tribute promised by the northern lords. It was September 25th, a warm late summer day. Believing there was no further threat, the Vikings were relaxed. Many had left their heavy chainmail armor, their burnies, back at the ships to cope with the heat. It was a fatal mistake. Suddenly, a cloud of dust appeared on the horizon. It wasn't hostages, it was the English army. King Harold Godwinson, in an astonishing feat of speed and determination, had marched his army nearly 200 miles north in just 4 days. The Vikings were caught completely by surprise. What followed was one of the most savage battles of the medieval age. The Vikings, without their full armor, were at a severe disadvantage. They scrambled to form a shield wall on the eastern bank of the river, but the English onslaught was relentless. According to the sagas, one giant Viking warrior held the narrow bridge alone, cutting down dozens of Englishmen before he was finally brought down by a spear thrust from beneath the bridge. The English army poured across. In the swirling chaos of the melee, Harald Hardrada fought like the lion he was. Towering over other men, wielding a huge two-handed sword, he went into a berserker rage, cutting a path through the English ranks. He was the hard ruler, the Thunderbolt of the North, fighting his last, most desperate battle. But without his armor, he was vulnerable. An English archer saw his opening. An arrow flew true, striking Harald in the throat. The last great Viking king fell, and with him, the heart of his army. The battle raged on, a fight to the death, but the outcome was sealed. The Viking army was annihilated. Of the 300 ships that had sailed for England, full of ambition and warriors, only 24 were needed to carry the few shattered survivors home. The Viking Age, an era of exploration, conquest, and terror that had spanned 3 centuries, effectively died that day on the fields of Stamford Bridge, alongside its last great king. While the victor, Harold Godwinson, would himself fall just 3 weeks later at the Battle of Hastings against another invader, William the Conqueror. The story of 1066 will forever be marked by the thunderous final chapter of Harald Hardrada, the boy who became a legend, and the king whose death signaled the end of the Vikings. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more epic history stories. See you next time.